Vos Altesses royales, Mesdames et
Your Royal
Messieurs,
Highnesses,
les chefs d'État et de gouvernement,
distinguished heads of states and
Mesdames
government,
et Messieurs, en vos grades et qualités,
distinguished guests,
chers vétérans,
dear veterans,
Mesdames et Messieurs,
ladies and gentlemen.
ici, il y a 80 ans,
80 years ago, on this very day and in this
Ces
very
hommes
place,
ont tout défié
these
pour
men
libérer notre sol,
went against all
notre
odds
nation.
to liberate our land and our nation.
Ici, ils ont défié les éléments.
It was here that they defied the elements,
Ciel bas,
the
ce
harsh
vent qui
winds,
battait les falaises.
the rain.
Ici, ils ont défié les certitudes.
They went
Hitler affirmait que l'Atlantique était un mur.
and fulfilled their
Lames
destiny.
déchirantes pour
Hitler
éventrer les barges,
believed
reliées à
that
des explosifs,
this was
barrières
that the Atlantic was a wall that would protect them. He had laid mines and anti-tank defenses along these beaches.
déployées sur ce
Over 150,000 men were deployed on this marine front.
des casques,
Everywhere
d'artillerie à fleur de dune,
there were bunkers and barbed wire and walls that had been erected by Field Marshal Rommel.
La tentative de débarquement sur les plages de Dieppe à l'été 1942
They had tried
avait tourné au
to invade and land in
Un
Dieppe
mois plus tôt,
some
lors
while
d'une
earlier,
répétition du
but it turned
D-Day
into
sur
a
les plages
massacre.
d'Angleterre,
They practiced on the beaches of England to prepare for D-Day,
avait provoqué
and an
plus
attack
de 800 morts chez les
by the German Navy, the Kriegsmarine, had led to the death of over 200
Pourtant,
Allied soldiers. And yet they found men
voilà
and
80
women
ans,
80 years ago on
rejoindre
this
les
day
combattants français de
to
l'outre-mer
join the French fighters
pour faire jonction avec
overseas
la résistance
and
française de
in
l'intérieur.
London, to work hand in hand with the French resistance in France to liberate our country.
Absorbés à l'est
The
par les
Nazi
unités de l'armée rouge,
enemy
harcelés à
was
l'ouest
being
par le
spent
patient travail
in
de
the
la
east
résistance
by fighting the Red
intérieure
Army
pouvait vaciller.
and was weakening in the west as well, fighting the internal resistance.
Le résistant
In 1942, the French resistance fighter René Duchesne,
de Caen
who was working at the commandantur in Caen,
de la côte nord.
managed to steal away the plans, the maps of the fortifications of the Normandy coast
Que le
between
colonel Rémy
near
ensuite
Honfleur and here.
transmit à Londres.
And they were later sent to
Pendant
London.
des mois,
For
préparant en grande
many
Bretagne
months,
des leurres, chars gonflables, canons en
they
bois,
prepared
formes fictifs, messages radio fantômes, pour
decoy
alimenter l'idée d'un
tanks
débarquement en
and
Norvège
vehicles
et dans le Pas-de-Calais.
and sent fake messages to
Sous le
make
couvert
the
de la
Germans
plus
believe
ambitieuse
that the
opération de renseignement et
landings would take place in Norway and elsewhere.
L'opération Overlord
This was one of the greatest operations in history. An Operation Overlord was prepared in the shadows and under the greatest secret hush.
la plus vaste armada
The greatest armada in all history was assembled
il y a 80 ans,
80 years ago.
la nuit du 5 au 6 juin
On the night
1944.
from the 5th to the 6th of June 1944, the impossible came to be against daunting
Derrière
odds.
nous la Manche, à perte de vue,
Behind us,
opaque.
the dark waters of
Dans
the
l'ombre,
English
immobile,
Channel, and facing it, France,
endormi dans la nuit de la défaite de 40,
sleeping in the long sleep since the defeat
prostré
it
dans
had
la
suffered in
faillite des
1940.
démocraties face au nazisme,
Europe,
et où
where
cependant
democracy had been vanquished by
les
Nazism
lueurs de la
4
résistance.
years earlier, and yet there was still hope
Dans la nuit,
thanks to the fight of the
l'ordre du
French
général
resistance
Eisenhower
here.
tombe.
Eisenhower gave his orders
Let's
during
go.
the night. Let's go.
Les bombardements commencent. 23 000
The bombing
parachutistes alliés
started.
se jettent dans la nuit
Over 20,000
de la gueule
paratroopers
ouverte de 800
throw
avions,
themselves
sans
out of
hésiter,
800 planes into the night sky
Cette
without
crainte et
hesitation,
l'évidence que ce jour-là, sauter sur Sainte-Mère-Église,
knowing full well
c'est sauter
that
dans
on
l'histoire.
that day, jumping onto Sainte-Mère-Église was
Une forêt de
jumping
barges, cuirassés,
into the pages of history.
croiseurs, destroyers, Les mâts et les palans des transports de matériel lourd derrière eux glissent vers la France.
Slowly, transport ships are moving towards the French
Les hommes
coast,
sont serrés.
on which men are huddled together, shoulder against shoulder.
Et on
Many
ne sait pas si cette
are
pâleur est le
pale,
mal de
and
mer,
one can't tell if the
qu'ils ont plié dans la
paleness
poche de
is
leur uniforme.
due to seasickness
des mots griffonnés à la hâte.
or because of the letters that they've
S'attachent à
written
une femme aimée,
into
un vieux
little
père,
scribble books in their
parfois
uniforms, messages for their mothers, fathers,
Face à
lovers,
eux,
children.
un rivage que personne,
And in front of them,
presque,
a
n'a jamais
coast
vu,
that none of them,
et qui sera
or almost none of
peut-être
them, had never seen
la
before,
dernière chose qu'ils verront.
and that will become perhaps the last thing they will ever see.
Les États-Unis sont là.
The
55
United
000
States
Américains qui font
are
cap
here.
sur Utah et Omaha Beach.
55,000 American soldiers
Omaha
are making their
sanglante.
way to Utah and
Ils ont
Omaha
traversé
Beach,
l'océan pour sauver un continent
bloody
qui n'est pas le
Omaha.
leur.
They have crossed an ocean
que cette
to
cause
save
est
a
la
continent that is not theirs for a cause
Le
that
Royaume-Uni est
is.
là.
The United
Avec
Kingdom
73 000
is here
soldats
too, with 73,000
tournés vers
soldiers
Gold et Sword Beach.
turned towards in the direction of Sword Beach
Dans sa
and
grande
Gold
tenue de
Beach.
cornemuseux d'Écosse, Bill Millin.
And among
tient
them,
sous
there
son
is
bras
Bill
l'instrument dont il
Milling,
a pour mission de jouer pour galvaniser
a
l'assaut.
bagpiper, that
Le
holding
Canada
his
est là.
instrument in his hand in order
21 000 hommes,
to
tous volontaires.
encourage the troops in their assault. Canada is also
se lancer à
here
l'assaut de
with
Juno
over
Beach.
20,000 troops
De minute
directed
en minute,
to
il
Juno
voit grandir
Beach.
à l'horizon cette lame de
Minute by
sable
minute, he
qui, pour
sees
certains, est la terre de
the
leurs
thin
ancêtres,
sliver of beach
partie de France il y a des
on the
siècles,
horizon coming
le
closer.
Québec ou l'Acadie.
The sliver
Français aussi,
of the continent that they themselves had left or their
177
ancestors had hundreds of years
commandant
earlier.
Kiefer, qui s'apprêtent à débarquer sur la plage de Sword Beach, les premiers. Car les barques
first
transportant les commandos britanniques,
British soldiers would
leur
reach
laissent
Sword Beach under
utile
Commander
élégance,
Kiefer,
quelques mètres d'avance, pour qu'ils touchent les premiers.
they would be
sol
the
de leur
first,
patrie.
bringing French soldiers to
Pense à
France
eux
to
en
be
ce
able to
jour.
touch again their
Ayons
native
le
soil, the soil of their
Yes,
homeland.
Ouistreham.
And I'd like to think of those at Ouistreham and at Songoti.
Le ciel est sillonné par des escadrilles pilotées par des Américains,
The
des Britanniques, des Canadiens,
skies are
des
crisscrossed by
Français,
squadrons
des Grecs,
piloted
des
by
Belges, des Norvégiens, des
French
Polonais,
people,
des Danois, des
Americans,
Tchécoslovaques,
Danes,
des
Greeks,
Néerlandais,
Poles,
des
Czechs,
Sud-Africains, des
Slovaks,
Néo-Zélandais ou
South
encore des
Africans, New
Australiens.
Zealanders, Australians,
Les
among
150
others.
000 débarqués du jour J
150,000 men land on D-Day, and they do not speak a common language.
ni le même drapeau.
They do not fight under the same banner or flag or wear the same uniform. What they
C'est leur
share,
volonté de
however,
libérer l'Europe
is
du
the
joug de la
will
tyrannie
to
nazie,
free Europe
de rapporter
from
la certitude de vivre
Nazi
dans un
tyranny
monde
in order to let us live in
d'une
a free
certaine
world.
vision de l'homme
It is a
digne
certain
ou
vision
non.
of
Oui,
a man that
ce
is
qu'il porte,
worthy
c'est la
and
liberté
noble,
réinventée
that
au
carries
péril de leur vie.
and freedom,
Ce qu'ils
freedom
ont
that
en
they are
commun,
risking
c'est l'aube
to the peril of their very
fragile et
lives.
l'aurore sanglante. Ce qu'ils ont en commun,
What
c'est
they
l'angoisse
share
et la gloire,
is also the fright
c'est
and
le sable
glory. It
et le
is
sang.
the sands of this
Seront
beach
tout
and the
leur or.
blood that they will spill here. This is their gold,
Nous pensons à eux tous.
and we spare a thought for them all with great gratitude.
À ces hommes qui avaient 17, 18 ans,
To these young
20,
men
40,
of 17
qui ont posé
years
leur
or
fourche quelque
18
part dans le
years old,
Minnesota,
some of them
dans le
older,
Kent ou dans
who
l'Aubrac, pour prendre le fusil.
had left their
À ceux que la
homesteads
mer a
in
ensevelis,
Kent or in
ceux qui sont
America
morts, front
to come
contre
and
terre,
fight here, to
ceux qui ont
those
été criblés
who
de
died
balles
here
en plein ciel,
under the bullets,
à ceux
those
qui ont survécu,
who were killed in the skies before they even
à
touched
ceux
the
qui sont
ground,
là
to those who
aujourd'hui,
survived, to those who are here with us still today, to those who told us about how they threw themselves into the sea with 30-kilo backpacks, to how they braved their fright under the machine gun fire, how they crossed the dunes and climbed the cliffs in order to fight the enemy, moving forward, always and forever. You have told us about the lives of some of the 10,000 of your brothers in arms who fell that day, their bodies floating on the waters, lapped by the waves. Moving forward, against the odds, in a red tide. Courage is not experiencing fear and ignoring it. Courage is to be afraid, but to go forth nevertheless. That is what the GIs do in their planes, having covered their face in dark coal, ready to jump. Saying it's a long way to go. It's Bill Mullins playing his bagpipes on the ridge here as the Germans are shocked to see him, afraid to shoot what they consider to be a madman. It's McGregor, the Canadian sharpshooter, who blew up a bunker and managed to single-handedly capture 93 prisoners of war. It is the chaplain under Commandant Kiefer who gave the last rites to people dying and breathing their last breaths under the bullets. The American soldiers who climbed the cliff and fought hand to hand using a knife under German fire. All these men were scared. There is no doubt about that. But they knew that the war they were fighting was a just war. They knew that it might lead to their death. But they went forth because each of their steps brought humanity closer to freedom. Our freedom, our liberation, was not something that was won in a day, even if that day was the longest one. It is something that was prepared for many months, for years, by the fighters of the resistance, by the fighters on the Eastern Front, and prepared by the Allies. It took time to win back Europe. It took many sacrifices to do this, sacrifices that one is able to do for love of freedom. The French freedom fighters who disembarked in Italy in 1943 in Corsica, the fighters inside the country who would sabotage infrastructures and disrupt communications, harass German troops. Allied reinforcements who landed in Normandy during the months of July and August, as well as Norwegians, the Piron Brigade made of Luxembourgers and Belgians, wearing a golden lion insignia on their chest. The Dutch, under Princess Irene, the second French tank division under General Leclerc, the Polish tank division, that of Czechoslovakia. Then the Allies landed in Provence. Over 250,000 free Frenchmen as well joined them there, together with Pieds Noirs from North Africa, with volunteers from the Maghreb, from West Africa, from Equatorial Africa. Our colonial forces, Moroccan Goumiers, Senegalese tirailleurs, who would together work to open up a new front in the
la
West
tenaille du front de l'Est,
and the South.
l'engagement résolu de l'armée
We
rouge
also
et
needed
de tous les
the
peuples.
engagement and relentlessness of the Red Army in the East and the people of the Soviet Empire that did their bit too. These millions of soldiers who sacrificed themselves in order to push back 180 German divisions along the Eastern Front, and paying for this with a tribute of blood, leaving their lives there.
Par la convergence de leurs efforts,
By the convergence of all the efforts of all these men, by all these efforts, Cherbourg fell, then Orléans, then Paris, Marseille, Lyon, Metz, Calais, finally Strasbourg at the end of November, and then Germany and Berlin, which led to the capitulation of the Reich in May 1945. And then we had to rebuild our Europe, thanks to peace and friendship among nations, by forgiving and by promising, according to Hannah Arendt's words. Europe has defended democratic values for over 70 years, even though, during that time, part of Europe was still kidnapped in the central and eastern parts of it. Europe, founded on values that were set in Philadelphia and San Francisco, enabled us to find our way and build friendship and to have a shared ambition with Germany, which is the foundation to our union. We have strengthened ourselves by bringing our countries and our nations together, like the veterans of D-Day have shown us the way. We have followed it. And so, dear Chancellor Olaf Scholz, I think also about Johannes Berner, a young German paratrooper, 19 years old, who was on the other side of the beach on D-Day. He was taken prisoner. Later on, he came back and decided to move to Normandy. He applied for French nationality and married Thérèse, a Norman girl. And he became a true European. At Ouistreham, he opened a restaurant, and Johannes Werner met Mr. Gautier, who also fought under Commander Kiefer. A deep friendship was born between these two men who had been enemies before. This is a true metaphor of the reconciliation between our nations. We are all gathered here today, children of the Normandy landings. Those who landed here on the 6th of June were not fighting on their home soil, and they were not fighting for their home villages. They were fighting against an evil, deadly ideology, a culture of hatred that had crushed Jews underfoot, as well as people with disabilities, homosexuals, Freemasons, gypsies, communists, all the people who thought or lived or believed differently. And the silence of our beaches at this moment is filled with the echoes, the sounds of bullets and screams of these men who came from so many different nations. Those who are sleeping under the beaches, under the sands of Normandy, or under the ocean waves, who are buried at the bottom of the seas here, or in the Norman landscape. There are many who also went home but left part of themselves here. So, war is returning to our continent now, and facing this situation, we need to remember everything that these people fought for. faced with those who are trying to change borders by force of arms and who are trying to rewrite history. We have to be worthy of those who fought for us in this place. Your presence here with us today, Mr. President of Ukraine, says all of this.
Merci. Merci au peuple ukrainien.
I'd like to thank the Ukrainian people for their bravery, for the taste they have of freedom. We are here with you and we will not waver.
Alors oui, quand guettent l'anesthésie et l'amnésie.
And so it's true, when threatened with amnesia, when our consciences fall asleep,
c'est cet élan intact qui nous entraîne, sans crainte.
it is this memory that pushes us and makes us fearless. And that is why we are gathered here today, knowing that freedom is a cause that needs to be fought for every single morning. And so, for all people who everywhere on this planet live in hope of living freely, for freedom, equality, and fraternity, for these people, the 6th of June is a struggle that is continuously renewed. Thank you to all of you. Long live the Republic, long live France.